I want you to try something for a second. Just look around you right now. Seriously, take a look at your desk, maybe look at your hands, or just scan the room you're sitting in. We have this ingrained habit of thinking about existence as this fixed, static list of things, right? Like it's just a collection of objects that we can touch, measure, map out, and put into neat little categories. But what if that whole perspective is just an illusion? What if existence isn't just the stuff that's already sitting here? What if, at its absolute core, existence is actually a highly dynamic, ever-unfolding space of mere possibilities? Today, we are going to completely flip how you view reality. We're moving away from that boring, static picture of the universe, and we're stepping into this truly breathtaking framework where reality itself is just an expanding space of pure potential.
Welcome to today's Explainer. Now buckle up, because we are taking an incredibly deep dive into a brilliant theoretical framework from our source material that manages to pull off something that honestly seems impossible. It actually unites the cold, hard laws of physics, the messy, chaotic evolution of biology, the rise of human civilization, and even the bleeding edge of artificial intelligence, all into one single cohesive narrative. It's wild. We're going to explore exactly how existence operates on these multiple layers, how hidden, unseen possibilities are actually the engine driving the expansion of our universe, and how human language, and now AI, are literally acting as engines creating entirely new realities. I know, it sounds like a dense, mind-bending topic, and it is, but I promise you, by the end of this, you are going to look at your own words, and even your own thoughts, in a completely new light. Okay, let's look at the roadmap for the concepts we're tackling today. We'll start with the multi-layered existence, move into otherness and new space-time, then information and super-layered language. After that, we'll hit the paradox of civilization and AI, the moment of layer tipping, and finally, wrap it all up with infinitely expanding possibilities.
All right, part 1, the multi-layered existence. This is our foundational concept.
So the very first thing we need to understand is that existence does not sit on a single flat plane. Existence is inherently what the source material calls layer-dependent. To get your head around this, think about a single carbon atom just floating in the air. Now, compare that to a nation's currency, like a physical dollar bill or even a digital dollar in your bank account. Both of these things undoubtedly exist, right? Obviously, but they operate under completely entirely different laws of possibility. The key takeaway here is that the physical layer and the symbolic layer aren't just two different ways of looking at the exact same world. No. Each layer has its own entirely unique space of what is actually possible. Think about it. A carbon atom cannot make a promise, it can't pass a new tax law, and it certainly cannot go into debt. Yet, when you zoom out to the symbolic layer of human society, concepts like debt, laws, and promises are absolutely undeniably real. They are incredibly powerful causal forces that can start global wars or build massive, sprawling cities. So creating a new layer isn't just dropping new objects into a pre-existing world, it is the literal opening up of a brand new space-time. It's governed by entirely new rules, where totally new events, relationships, and subjects suddenly become possible.
So that brings us to part 2, otherness, and this concept of new space-time.
We have to ask, what is the hidden engine that actually drives the expansion of these layers we just talked about? Well, to understand that, we need to unpack a really profound concept called otherness. Now, the crucial point here is that in this context, otherness isn't just some vague philosophical term for other people. And it's also not just a fancy word for ignorance. Because think about it, ignorance implies that there's already a fixed, decided answer sitting out there and you just happen to not know it yet. Otherness is entirely different from that. It represents actual, completely open possibilities that have not yet been grounded in our reality. The best way to visualize this is to think of a massive open-world video game. You know how when you're exploring parts of the map haven't rendered yet? It's not that there are fully formed mountains just hiding in the dark. It's that their exact shape literally hasn't been decided by the system's engine yet. The source explains this so beautifully. It says, otherness appears spatially as unvisited places. And it doesn't just mean places that are far away, but places where the relationships and events that are going to happen there are fundamentally undecided. And temporally, otherness appears as unhappened futures. The future isn't some predetermined path we just haven't walked down yet. It is a sprawling, totally open possibility space. So both unvisited spaces and unhappened futures are basically raw forms of otherness that our current systems haven't absorbed.
And what's really fascinating is how this abstract concept of otherness scales perfectly across absolutely every single layer of reality. Let's look at this breakdown. Down in the incredibly tiny realm of quantum physics, otherness manifests as unmeasured states. These are quantum fluctuations we literally cannot pin down until we actually force an interaction with them. Now scale that up to the biological layer. Here, otherness becomes unexperienced stimuli. Think about the sudden, unpredictable evolutionary appearance of a brand new predator, or a rapidly changing climate, or, an unknown pathogen like a novel virus. The biological system couldn't predict it. Then, scale it all the way up to the massive complexity of human society. At this level, otherness takes the form of marginalized groups, radically new generational ideas, or demands from the public that haven't been institutionalized into laws yet. In every single one of these layers, otherness acts as the unpredictable outside. It's the wild card that forces the current established system to react, to adapt, and ultimately to expand.
Moving right along to Part 3, Information and Superlayered Language. Let's look at how we actually interact with all this unknown stuff.
So, existence isn't just about floating around being surrounded by the great unknown. When a subject actually interacts with this chaotic otherness, it leaves a mark. It creates a difference on the subject. And the continuous, ongoing generation, exchange, and compression of these differences, that is exactly what the source calls information dynamics. Now, here's where it gets a little wild. In a shockingly broad sense, this entire dynamic process of handling information is actually what we call language. Even physical matter has a kind of grammar. The laws of chemistry dictate exactly how atoms are allowed to combine, which is basically the exact same way grammatical rules dictate how words can combine in a sentence. Biology has the incredibly complex grammar of DNA. But human language? Human language is an absolute superpower. Why? Because our language doesn't just describe one single isolated layer. It can actually cross them. Think about it. We can deeply understand a physical concept like entropy when we're looking at a combustion engine, and then we can take that exact same word and accurately apply it to the collapse of a social structure, or even a failing romantic relationship. This unique human ability to cross, compare, and reconstruct multiple different layers simultaneously is a super-layered creation.
Which brings us to a really fascinating tool that I guarantee you use every single day without even realizing how profound it is: inner language. We usually think of inner language as just, silently rehearsing a difficult conversation you need to have with your boss, or arguing with someone in the shower. But according to the text, it is much, much deeper than that. It is actually a highly specialized tool that we use to communicate with our own internal otherness. Because we all have these unarticulated memories, unprocessed traumas, and wildly conflicting desires just lurking beneath the surface, right? Those are our internal others. So when you sit alone in silence and seriously ask yourself, why did I react so angrily today? You aren't just thinking. You are literally initiating a dialogue with the unknown, unrendered parts of your own mind.
And this reveals the true, staggering power of asking questions. When we start stacking these internal questions, like asking ourselves, okay, which layer did this emotion actually come from? Was it just biological exhaustion because I didn't sleep? Or was it a symbolic threat to my ego? When we do that, we are doing something incredible. We are not just searching our brain like we're looking up a file on a hard drive. That's not how it works. Good, deep questions actually highlight brand new differences, and they create entirely new conceptual axes in our heads. By relentlessly questioning our own internal states, we are actually creating new concepts and opening up entirely new structural spaces within our own minds. Through language, we are literally generating new realities from the inside out, rather than just passively searching for fixed, pre-written answers.
All right, Part 4, the paradox of civilization and AI. Let's see what happens when human language scales up to a massive level. So as language builds these incredibly complex human systems, they have to try and manage all this ever-expanding otherness. The source text describes human civilization as a sort of historical Carnot engine. If you aren't familiar, a Carnot engine is a concept from physics. It refers to a massive, heat-processing machine that's essentially designed to consume chaotic, messy information and pump out pure, usable order. Biology, state governance, democracy, and now AI, they are all what we call anti-entropic systems. Their main job is trying to absolutely crush uncertainty. Look at organisms. They constantly predict their environments just to survive the day. Modern states, they act almost like Laplace's demon. That's the theoretical philosophical entity that knows the exact location of every single atom so it can perfectly predict the future. States try to do this by using massive intelligence agencies and oceans of big data to foresee and control absolutely everything. Democracy is a really interesting example here too. The text describes democratic systems as a way of institutionalizing safe internal otherness. Think about it. Elections and minority protections don't actually eliminate unpredictability. People still disagree, but it institutionalizes that disagreement so it doesn't boil over into a bloody revolution. And today, we have artificial intelligence, which is trying to compress massive, unimaginable corpuses of human text in an attempt to reduce predictive errors down to near zero. But here is the grand, inescapable paradox of all of this. No matter how hard these massive, complex systems try, they absolutely cannot eliminate otherness. They just can't. As the text explicitly states, and this is a great quote, "Dynamics do not eliminate otherness, they transform it." Let's really think about that. When human beings invented the combustion engine, the goal was to solve the problem of distance, right? We wanted to get from point A to point B faster. But in solving that problem, it spawned entirely new, completely unprecedented problems that didn't exist before, like global climate change, massive supply chain conflicts, and sprawling suburban gridlock. Or think about biology. When an organism perfectly adapts to its environment, it accidentally creates brand new ecological niches, which just invites new competition. The point is, solving a problem in one layer simply internalizes that specific piece of chaos, while forcefully pushing a brand new, completely never-before-seen form of otherness out to the outside boundaries of the system. It's like squeezing a balloon. The air doesn't disappear, it just pushes out somewhere else.
Which naturally leads us to part 5, the moment of layer tipping. What happens when the balloon pops?
So we have to ask, what happens when these systems push so much of this transformed otherness to their boundaries that they literally can no longer absorb the errors? Well, we reach a critical threshold. And this threshold is what the source calls layer tipping. When prediction errors, anomalies, and systemic contradictions pile up to the absolute breaking point, the old grammars and the old methods of compressing information just fail completely. But here's the beautiful part. They don't just collapse into dust and disappear. They fundamentally reorganize. You see, layer tipping is not merely a change in state. It's not like water simply freezing into ice. It is a complete, explosive transformation of the possibility space itself. Think about the astronomical, mind-boggling leap from dead, floating space dust to a living, breathing, dividing biological cell. Or the leap from biological apes to human beings who can utilize complex symbolic language to build massive global empires. These were not just quantitative, incremental shifts. These were the literal births of entirely new spacetimes, featuring brand new types of subjects, operating under completely new laws of cause and effect. Now, let's connect this explosive, world-changing concept directly back to artificial intelligence. Because right now, massive tech corporations and powerful states are using AI as the ultimate anti-entropy machine. They are desperately trying to compress all of human data to basically monopolize the future. But AI is completely trapped in that exact same paradox we just talked about. As it fiercely compresses text and data, it paradoxically spawns unprecedented levels of chaos. Think about AI hallucinations, or completely indistinguishable deepfakes, the sudden, jarring automation of cognitive labor, the absolute collapse of traditional copyright law, and these massive, sweeping shifts in global power relations. These aren't just bugs in the code. These are entirely novel symbolic events that our current human laws and frameworks simply cannot handle. So AI is definitely not a machine that is eliminating otherness. Quite the opposite. It is violently rearranging it. AI is acting as a dynamic pseudo-subject that is rapidly, aggressively setting the conditions for humanity's next major layer transition.
And finally, part 6, infinitely expanding possibilities. Let's pull all these threads together.
We have covered a tremendous amount of ground today, right? We've traversed the weirdness of quantum physics, the depths of our own inner language, and the absolute frontiers of AI. Now watch how all of this builds into the continuous recursive engine of existence described in our source text. It operates in this endless, magnificent 5-step loop. Step 1. There is otherness. This is the raw, ungrounded, unrendered potential of the unknown. Step 2. Subjects inevitably bump into this otherness, which creates friction and differences, and we call that information. Step 3. The dynamic processing, sorting, and questioning of that information forms what we call language. Step 4. As this language pushes its own boundaries and forms radical new concepts, it causes space-time expansion, literally breaking open entirely new layers of reality, just like the leap from chemistry to biology. And finally, Step 5. This newly expanded reality immediately generates a brand new otherness, right at its fresh, uncharted borders. And then, the loop just begins again, forever.
So, what we are ultimately left with is a truly staggering conclusion. Existence is not a static warehouse of objects that were just randomly placed here at the dawn of time, waiting for us to catalog them. Not at all. Existence is a dynamic, living,
ever-unfolding field of relationships. The universe is literally pulling itself outward by its own bootstraps. It is actively expanding its own possibilities through the relentless, unending processing of the unknown, the unfamiliar, and the unpredicted.
And that brings us to our final thought for this explainer. The source text makes one thing incredibly abundantly clear. The fundamental feature of human language is not to just sit there and accurately copy a reality that already exists outside of us. Language is a generative, creative tool. It makes things happen. So, as you go about your day today, communicating with your friends, arguing online, or even just talking to your own internal otherness in the shower, I really want you to ask yourself, if your words are actually literal world-building tools, what entirely new space-time are you generating right now? Thank you so much for exploring this deeply fascinating framework with me today. Keep questioning everything and keep expanding your possibilities.